Hello.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Hello.
We're
Doing
doing
well.
well. How are
Yeah,
you?
look, I'm good. Look, I'm really sorry about all that mix-up.
No,
What
no
can I
need to be
say?
sorry at all.
Things
Our
happen.
our lives are maybe not so much Jim's life, but my life is so hectic that I can't cast any stones.
Fair
I'm
enough.
ru- yeah. So
What's that
thanks.
T-shirt? What's the T-shirt he's got on?
That's not
Which,
condescending, is it, to be?
I'm mad. Well,
that's, wow,
I'm
that's a
mad.
nice T-shirt. Nice
I'm kind of
T-shirt.
mad.
Thank
I'm
you.
kind of mad about it. I was telling him I'm kind of upset about it because
Yeah.
he got to go to the con. I missed the concert that when
Oh, no.
you guys came to Omaha, Nebraska, maybe a year and a half
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
and I got COVID. I was getting ready to walk out
Ah,
the door. I'm in Kansas City, and I was going to drive up, and I was just down to the wire, and I was like, yeah, I'm starting to feel bad, and I probably should take a test, and I was like, yeah. So yeah, I didn't get to go.
so which one's Jimmy James?
I'm Jimmy James.
Yeah, and who's the other one?
I'm just Jim.
Oh,
No, Jim.
you're
Just
Jim.
Jim, yes.
You're
I was
Jim
the
and you're
first one.
Jimmy.
He's
I was the first one that talked to you originally.
Okay. All right.
yeah.
All right.
We'll call him Lord Jim for the purposes of this interview. How
Ah,
about that?
yeah.
We could talk about that.
I'll take it.
But
That's fine.
thanks so much for joining us.
No worries.
I couldn't hardly believe it when Jim said he had reached out. I was like, "There's no way you're gonna get to talk to Steve," but
Ah, here I am.
here
I'm
you
talking.
are in the
Yeah.
flesh. Yeah. So, yeah. Once again, thank you so much for joining
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've got a bunch of questions. We'll see what we can get
Fire
through.
away. Yeah.
And we a lot of times we're going to kind of go chronologically, but
However you,
yeah.
however you
So,
guys want to
but
do
we
it.
might jump around, and Jim, you might
Jump
throw in
around,
some extra questions.
digress, extra
All
questions.
right.
I'm ready.
Awesome.
I'm ready for all
We'll
possibilities.
see
I'll
where it
tell you.
goes.
Yeah.
Woohoo! All right. So one of the first questions we always ask, and forgive, indulge us, because
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of your fans have already heard all of this stuff,
Yeah.
but a lot of the people that you know are fans of the church have just heard that one song, the one,
Yeah.
and
I know the one.
and I swore to myself, I don't think I even told you, Jim, I'm not going to bring up that song in this
And
because
yet,
it's been talked about. Yeah, I
it's
didn't bring it
been
up by name, okay?
okay. Yeah.
but
And
but
and
a
and
lot of people only know the band by that, you
they
know,
do
and there's so much more and to your
so
music
much more.
and your style,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so we usually cover a little bit of the history and just find out
Okay.
how you started playing music, and writing music, and what
All
age
right.
and your history for that.
Okay. All right. Um, I was always interested in the writing of music. I was always, when I started buying records, I noticed there were these names in brackets. They'd have the song title. For example, I bought the Rollings, one of the first records I ever bought with my own money. Well, my mon with without my own money, my dad had given me. I went in a record shop and I bought "Under the Boardwalk" by the Rolling Stones. And then
Awesome.
when I looked in the bracket underneath there, it wasn't any names I recognized. And then on the flip side as well, "Walking the Dog," um, I noticed that the guys who singing aren't necessarily the same guys writing. And I started thinking about writing. I started writing little songs in my head when I was 10. I still I could hear
Wow.
these records, and I guess I started properly writing when I was 16, like actually writing something. You would go, here's a song.
Hmm.
And then, and then I formed some bands and I wrote all the songs for them. And it was like, in Canberra, you got to imagine Canberra in 1972. Canberra, the capital of Australia, in 1972. It's not exactly Detroit Rock City, you know what I mean? It's not London. And people going, you can't write songs. What do you mean? You can't write songs. What are you doing writing songs? That's not what. Where do you get the audacity to write songs? Anyway, I had a load of hopeless bands. One of the bands actually had a record deal, and
Oh wow.
about 4 or 5 years ago, someone scraped together all of the demos and recordings that this band made called Baby Grande, and put them out there. You can hear it or get it if you really want it. It's pretty awful. And then Baby Grande kicked me out of my own band. I got kicked out of my own band. Whoa. And that's when one door closed, another door opened. At the same time I was kicked out, the first 4-track domestic model became available, which means you could do 4-track recording in your own home, which nowadays everyone takes for granted.
Right.
Or like they go, yeah. But in 1977, when this happened, previous to that, you'd have to go in a studio, even for 4-track, and it'd be like a great big thing, like a great big machine that you'd never dream of having at home, using great big thick tape that you could never afford, and all of this. Suddenly, TIAC changed my life. Anyway, they made a tape machine and a little mixing desk that was just like a real mixing desk. And I bought one of those, and then I spent 3 years properly honing my writing skills, which were no longer now. It didn't all have to happen at once. I figured out lots of different writing techniques and strategies, like building things up slowly. You know, starting off with a drum machine and then just adding a bass and then adding one guitar and another guitar and some keyboards, and I figured out. And after a while, I started writing these pretty good demos. That's when I formed the church, and we had some pretty good demos, and I kind of understood how my song should be. And as soon as we went in the studio with the church, I sort of hit the ground running, because I knew what could and couldn't be done.
Yeah.
In a recording sense, and like how I wanted things to be. And if they sounded good on the demo, I knew this was the strategy I had to pursue in the recording studio. So that's kind of how it all happened. Also, at age 16, I nagged my dad into buying me a bass guitar, and I got a bass guitar, and I got an amplifier, and I also had an acoustic guitar, and I kind of taught myself, and I started jamming with all the local kids, and you know, just fiddling around with guitars incessantly and hanging around with other musicians, buying all the music papers, spending all my money on records, and just sort of being a complete music, you know, like music was my thing. That was in the common room at school, in our last 2 years at school, there was a record player which I commandeered, and I was the one, thou shalt not play that record, you know, unless you're going to cop a lot of, you know, I was a real Nazi with that. A real music sort of,
snob.
Yeah. Yeah, a snob. And I learned the power of, and I also realized how I would delight in getting people to like bad things just because I said they were good. You know what I mean? Like this thing is obviously bad. I can see with my powers of persuasion if I can get other people to think it is actually good. I think a lot of music critics used to do that. Yeah. They used to do that. I don't think they can afford to do it anymore, and most reviews are positive. But I think they loved their power, and they would love to persuade you that something that was truly abysmal was actually good. So that's really how it is. And along the way, I played in sort of cabaret bands. I played bass. I played in a bass in a jazz trio. I formed and broke up lots of little bands, like all within Canberra. And then in 1979, I moved to Sydney, and I kind of got serious. And we made a demo, and the first guy heard it, signed us up, and we got a publishing deal and a recording deal with EMI, and we were sort of off and running.
That's a good start.
How was your time, using that 4-track and all the stuff you were doing to learn about that? How valuable was that in your progress?
Look, I was obsessed. And not only that, but I was working in complete isolation, and nobody was interested in what I was doing. A few times I took it into where I was working. I was working as a public servant, and they didn't like the stuff I was playing. The only person who liked what I was doing was my younger brother, Russell. And he used to come round. He was like 8 years younger than me, and he'd come round, I'd play him my songs. And he was like, wow, this is incredible. And it wasn't for him. I don't know what I would have done. I played some to my mother once. She said, that must be really depressing sitting in a room listening to that. She wasn't digging it much.
He didn't get it.
So I had a spare room in a house I was living in, and I had the TIAC, and I had the mixing desk, and I had a bass, and I had a guitar, and I had an acoustic guitar. I had a monophonic synthesizer, so I had to overdub chords one note at a time. And I had a few effects, very primitive effects they had in those days, like I had a flange pedal. As soon as you turned it on, it was like you didn't even have to do anything. As soon as you turned this,
just humming.
It's called an electric mistress. Everything went.
Oh, yeah.
And I just spent every moment I had playing around with it. As soon as I got home from work, when I woke up in the morning, I'd be up in there again all weekend playing around with it. And then even when the church started getting kind of some success, living in Sydney in my new house, it was just, I was like a fisherman who found a really good fishing hole, and I couldn't leave it alone. I couldn't believe that every time I went in there, I would emerge with another track that everybody liked. And then I even had some people hanging every night in my house in Sydney. I'd go in there and people would come over for dinner, and then all the blokes would come in the room and watch me do it. And I'd sort of do it in front of a live audience. I'd sort of start off with nothing, and then 2 hours later I'd stumble out of there with a track. So I kind of I realized this a long time ago when I was about 15 or 16. They were putting out a school magazine every year, and when I was 16, the people who were putting up the schools came up and said, "Hey, Kilbey, you're a bit of a, you've got a big mouth. How about writing a poem?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I could write a poem." They said, "Just write a fucking poem." And so I sat down and I immediately knocked out this poem. And then the thing whatever it is, the thing that helped me write the poem said to me, "I'm always available if you use it properly. I will always be available to help you write." And I found that to be true. And now at age, I'm pushing 71, I still feel like whenever I need it, whenever I want to write music or write words or write a poem or write a book or whatever it is, I can tap into this thing. It's sort of, it's always been there, and it sort of goes on being there. Whatever it is, and I can't say. Sometimes I feel like it's a mystical thing. Other times I just think, well, I have honed this thing, so I've spent all my life doing it, and I've just sort of figured out how to do it, like a golfer that can always hit the ball in. And I can always hit the ball in, but I can never hit the ball in. And because I've had so much practice with writing. I never come away empty-handed. I always come up with something. So, for example, a few months ago, I made a new record with this guy, Gareth Koch, and I said, he's a classical guitarist. I said, we're going to make an album called The Songs of Atlantis. And he said, well, how? He said, I don't know what to write. I said, I'm going to give you the titles. So I just randomly made up these titles: Sacrifice by the River, In Poseidon's Temple, the Hyperion's Oar. I invented these titles. He wrote these pieces of music, booked the studio. I go in the studio, put the first piece of music on. He put the first piece of music on, and immediately it all just downloads. The words just come, the words and the melody come down to me. And that's how it works. There's another guy called Martin Kennedy. I've made a load of records with him. Yeah. We booked the studio for 2 days. He's got all this music ready. I just go in and I do it. He plays me the track, and I write the words, and I come up with the melody, and I figure it all out. And it all happens sort of like, I don't know. It's like it's like a transmission that I get, and I don't have to put a lot of work into it. And it's sort of, I never come away empty-handed. I refuse to admit defeat. Only once, I met these guys in a sauna, and I rang up. They were called Flight. I shouldn't say their name. They're kind of big. They're a big Australian band, and I rang up my manager and said, I've met these guys, whatever they're called. He said, oh, they're really big. You should do something. And they gave me a track, and it was the closest track you could come to absolutely nothing. It was like, so I put it on, and I'd go, right, come on, do your thing. I'm going to write the words because these guys make lots of money, and it'd be advantageous for me to do a song with them. And the song would go by, and I go, what? You didn't come up with anything. Put it on again. And then the thing went, I can't work on this one. There's nothing there. And I rang up my manager. I said, look, they've given me this track, but it's impossible. And he's going, oh, you must be able to do something. You know, their last single sold, 10 gazillion units. You better do it. I sat down with the music again, and the thing was like, nope.
Wow.
I can't do that one. So that was the one time nothing ever happened. But normally with any normal piece of music, I can usually come up with something very fast. So I do like this record we just did with Atlantis. I would do 5 tracks a day. And so over 2 days, I don't know, we did 11 or 12 tracks. So I sort of can come up with 5 things that, with no preparation whatsoever. I just walk in, play me the track comes on, and I do it. But I do the same thing with the church. We just went in a studio in Austin, and we start off with nothing, and we just jam around, and we jam around in all of us jamming, or me and just one other guy, or sometimes one of the other guys comes in, he's got a chord progression, and it all just works out. If you trust the process. I've always trusted the process. I trusted the process right that first day when they said, go and write a poem. And I saw that it was always there. So I've been lucky like that. I'm not very good at a lot of things. I'm a very bad learner, and I'm slow, and I'm not very good at practical things like hammering. And I've never been able to hammer a nail into a piece of wood without bending it. And but at this one thing, which is creating words and music, I'm in some sort of overdrive position, and always have been. So it was like it was my vocation to do this. Even when I was a kid, when I luckily my dad was a musician, and he when we played records or when we drove along in the car, or when the Beatles came along and he bought the first Beatles record, and we would talk about music, and I was always thinking about it. And my dad thought music was the most important thing in the world, and he conveyed that to me. Music is where it's at. Like, make no mistake. And so all of everything aligned. And I'm not an incredibly talented musician or singer. I mean, that's obvious. And and a lot of people who see this will go, "Yeah, you ain't kidding." but I make up for my, I look at some people, like you look at someone like Jeff Buckley, and it seems like he couldn't sing a note wrong. It just seems like music's flowing through him. I'm not really like that. I'm more like I have a bit of musical sort of quality, but the rest of it, I have compensated with my sort of brain by thinking it all through and figuring out how it all works. So it was always my vocation to be a writer, and from an early age, I didn't just start writing in my 20s because I thought there would be money in it, and I write a lot of stuff. I've probably written more songs than almost anybody else in the world that you could actually find published.
Yeah.
Like it's up in the, like it's must be 1,500 songs I've actually written that you could find. Not,
Right.
I mean, anyone can say they've written 2,000 songs. You say, where are they? They go, somewhere. Yeah, no, but
Yeah.
So there you go. So that's the story of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think it's partly you put all that time in, and you talked about the golfer that hits it in the hole, right, because of all the practice. But I think there's a bigger part of it that's just your gift, or whatever you want to call it. You talk, or you think about all these groups or these bands that say, they have these stories where we wrote this one song to, like, in 10 minutes, and they have that one song where they could do that in 10 minutes, right? But otherwise they struggle. But it seems like you've had the opposite.
Never struggle.
So that's
if
amazing
I struggle,
to me.
If I'm struggling, there's something wrong. I never struggle with writing songs. So that's kind of my mantra. I would say every song I've ever written, I've written in 10 minutes. Like the guts of it is all over in 10 minutes, 5 minutes even. Under the Milky Way.
Yep. Even that one.
Yeah, even that one. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It was done.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
why would it? As long as it takes to play it, if the song's 4 minutes long, that's probably took me 4 minutes to write it. It all
Amazing.
happens quickly. There's a sort of a transmission, and sometimes I can't write the words down fast enough. When I'm writing, when I'm in the position where the music's been written, and I'm writing the words, and and I've got the idea. Sometimes I cannot get them down quick enough. I can hear all of the words for the whole song in my head going in one go. It's just, I think, obviously I had a predilection for this to start with, but it's just obsession, like spending a whole life where all you think about, all you talk about, all that matters to you is fucking rock music, reading magazines, listening to it, arguing with people. When I had a job, spending all day on the phone talking to other musicians I knew about music, and hanging around in music shops, and just being a complete, it paid off. But always, never from a playing point of view, always from a writing point of view. That writing has always been the most important thing, not the actual playing. Like I'm not obsessed with technique. I appreciate someone who's got good technique. I really appreciate that. But to me, the creation of music is more important. And someone just going or on a keyboard going, I'm not really interested in that. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in ugly music either. I'm not interested in a horrible racket. So I'm interested in sort of beautiful music and the creation of sort of beautiful, uplifting kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I wanted to ask you about the band name.
Yeah.
I heard this, and I don't know if this is true, but I wanted to ask it because one of my favorite David Bowie songs is I'm slipping my Moonage
Daydream.
Yeah.
The Church of Man Love.
Is that kind of where the name came from?
Yeah, but where does the comma go? Is it the Church of Man, comma, love? Or is it the Church of Man
question.
Love?
Good question. I think a lot of people have misheard it as the Church of Mad Love, like mad.
Oh, I knew it wasn't. I knew it was man, but I'm not sure.
Where you're right.
Good
question.
I kind of it. You know, I had a whole bunch of names written down for the name of the group. It kind of just became the Church. I don't think that. I kind of regret that now. I wish it hadn't been called the Church. I think, I kind of stuck with it now after all this time.
Yeah.
But I think it probably puts some people off, and I wish it had been something more, I don't know, not so much baggage attached.
I kind of say it. Everybody gets something. They take their own thing from band names and songs and stuff like that. I feel like it's like I just think of it as hey, we're all in this Church of Man, like experiencing life, and I feel like that's what I relate to in the Church's music. So that's what I get from it.
That's the idea, yeah. So good on you. That's right.
Jim wanted to know how you met the original lineup.
Okay.
And I think you had Richard Plug in there, Jim, and I changed it.
Oh, I was wrong.
Okay. Yeah, he wasn't the original. I met Peter Koppes when we were teenagers in Canberra, when we were double booked in a rehearsal room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a hell of a lot of places to play, but there was a minister who was letting out his church in my neighborhood, and you could go in there, and quite a few different bands I was in rehearsed at this place. It was like bizarre. It was like
really
$1.50 for the afternoon. And then I had this glam rock band. One day we turned up, and there was another band in there. And this is like 1973. So I'm like 19. Peter's like 18. Peter was in the other band, and we were like a glam rock band, and we were like, I had conditioned these guys to be dismissive of any other music, because at this moment, glam rock was the most important thing. And down the other end of the hall, we decided we would have one hall and they would have the other end of the hall. So we played down, we did our rehearsal a bit, and then they would rehearse a bit. And Peter and I met, and I think Peter was impressed that I could write songs. And I was impressed that he was quite a phenomenal guitarist and a phenomenal drummer, because at one stage in the rehearsal, he had an argument with the drummer in his band, and that drummer got off the kit and Peter sat down and did this absolutely mind-blowing drum solo.
Wow.
So he could play drums and he could play guitar.
Nice.
But he couldn't write songs, and I couldn't play any instruments very well, just sort of like clodhopper on bass. I was an okay bass player. But he was playing all this Santana stuff. And we didn't like each other's music, but anyway, one thing led to another, and he ended up joining the band. And that was the band that he was in the band for a while. And then he left. And then after a little while, they kicked me out, and that's when I bought the 4-track. And then I moved up to Sydney, and I used to work in a market silk screening T-shirts. And one day Peter came along. Hi, Peter, how are you? And I said, listen, I bought a 4-track and I made some demos. And he came over and he really liked what I was doing. And then we did some recording together. And we said, let's get a band together. He unfortunately knew this absolute ratbag from my old high school who was playing drums with him. And he brought him along. And then about 3 gigs in, we did some gigs. And about on the 3rd or 4th gig, Marty Willson-Piper turned up with his wife, his then wife, who was a friend of somebody. And when Marty walked in, I was quite impressed. He looked pretty damn good. He looked like the missing member of Def Leppard. He had the look. Yeah. He had the look in spades. He had the look in spades. He had absolutely skin-tight jeans on, and a pair of sort of red gym boots and a stripy T-shirt, and he had long crimped hair. It wasn't exactly the right look for me. I didn't think that look in of itself was that good, but I could see that this guy would be an asset in a band. He was tall. He was very sort of muscular. He wasn't sort of like one of those rockers you see all. No, he was like a very impressive looking guy. And much to the chagrin of the other 2 guys in the band, I said to him, hey, can you play guitar? And he said, yeah, I can a bit. And I said, hey, would you like to join this group? And he said, yeah. And I went and told the other 2 guys, and they said, you fucking invited a guy into our band that you had never even heard play. And I said, trust me, it's going to work out. And, the drummer hated him and never could get over that I had just invited him in. And then the drummer eventually got violent with him.
Oh, wow.
And we kicked the drummer out, and we put an ad in the paper for a new drummer. And Richard Ploog turned up, who was only 18 at the time. And I was 25. And Richard Ploog turned up, and we made our first album with this Nick Ward, the drummer. And then Richard Ploog turned up and blew us all away with his drumming. So he joined the band, and that was what you would call the classic, people would say the classic early lineup of the Church.
Right.
So Ploog joined in 81 after the first album had been made. But then immediately when he joined, we made an EP, and some of the EP found its way onto the version of the album in America and in England. And that was like the early classic version, Ploog and Marty and Peter Koppes.
Was there an album called The Church, I think? Yes. Yeah.
In Australia,
I have it.
In Australia it was called Of Skins and Heart.
Right.
And had a diagram of a heart. In England it was called The Church and had some different tracks. And there's an angel falling downstairs, a statue, and a head's broken off.
That's the one I have. Yep.
And then in America, they kind of rejigged that cover, so it's got more of a kind of a framework, but it's still the same painting. Yeah, and it's just called The Church. Yeah, but didn't go anywhere in America at all. The record company tried to fuck with it. They edited Unguarded Moment. They didn't believe in it, and nothing happened. And then they wouldn't even put out the Blurred Crusade, the second album.
Oh,
So
man.
those are nothing. Only when Arista became our record company, they re-released all our early albums. In when Starfish was a hit.
Was Heyday on Arista, or was that after? That was Starfish.
Heyday. So the first album came out on Capitol. They passed on the second album. Nobody put the third album out, which is called Seance. Our fourth album was released by Warner Brothers. It was a compilation of 2 EPs we put out in Australia. That was called Remote Luxury. Mm-hmm. And then we put out Heyday, and then Warner Brothers dropped us. And then Arista signed us up. And when Starfish was a relative success, they released those 5 albums, re-released them all again on Arista.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's about the time I started finding them all.
Yeah,
right after that. Yeah, so those are the releases by Arista.
Yeah.
I didn't find Seance for a long time, though. I didn't find it then. But
yeah, it's funny.
Sometimes
you do something like if you play chess, there's a move called a gambit. It's where you lose a piece early on in the game to gain something bigger towards the end, and Seance was a bit like a gambit. It came out in Australia and didn't come out in America. And American people say it's one of the first goth records ever. And certainly the title and the cover and some of the music on it was kind of, although I didn't realize that. And it was very hard. A bunch of American kids knew about it, and they were buying it at college record shops. In fact, the guy who eventually sort of signed us up was this guy called Mark Geiger, who became a real big shot. And he was like a 19-year-old guy who worked at the college record shop, and they imported in a copy of Seance, and he became really obsessed by it. And it was ultra, ultra hard to find. You know how that works. You know, when something's really ultra hard to find and nobody's heard of it, and it's by an obscure band called The Church, who's probably never going to, have never been to America and nobody's ever heard of them, but you've got a copy of it, then the record that all kind of can take on a life of its own. So Seance was, although nobody really liked it at the time, it sort of had this little mythos going for it. I still meet Americans now, they're in their 50s and 60s. Oh, Seance will always be the one for me,
Interesting.
So
I like it a lot. I wouldn't have thought that, but I think it's a cool record.
Yeah. I don't think The Church ever made a bad record. I think we've made some not as good as they could be records. I think we made records that weren't. I think we made some absolutely monumental records, and then we made some records that were much less than monumental. But we've never made a bad record. We've never made an awful record, like a record where you go, Jesus Christ, why did they bother? So I think Seance was kind of it was an okay record, not a bad record, but wasn't as good as the record before that, which is the Blurred Crusade, which I think
is a great record.
The planets really aligned on our second record. We got it right. Of course, we had the legendary producer Bob Clearmountain, and he came to Australia and we made this record. Fucking Capitol Records said, no, we're not releasing this. American kids wouldn't like it. And I think the Blurred Crusade was our first masterpiece. And then, Seance wasn't really a masterpiece, but was a real niche. It was a niche record where I just knew someone out there will really love what this is, but it's never going to be a huge seller, and it wasn't.
Did you have a goal in mind beyond that, like just coming up with something that was, going to be a unique, meet a niche need, or would you just, put
I
off by, you know,
No, I don't
um,
listen. I don't take any notice of all of that. And I can only do what I
mhm,
do. And I never know what I'm going to do. And it's random. And that's why all those people from record companies who wasted all that time going, hey, Steve, you should do this, or you should do that, or you should do this, or you should try and be like that. I don't have that much control over what I do. And if I walked into a studio today, I could guarantee you I would make a piece of music, but I have no idea what it would be. And that's how they all are. Like I sit down with a tape recorder, I sit down with an acoustic guitar, I sit down with somebody else. We're going to write music together. I don't know what I'm going to do, and it doesn't work out well for me to try and this creative thing that I have. It doesn't work out too well when I try and say, "Oh, we're going to write a hit single." And all of the one or two hits that I've had, probably in America they go, it was only one, was written accidentally. It wasn't written by sitting down going, I'm gonna write a hit. And nor was Unguarded Moment or however, you can hear what I and the church came up with by going, let's write a hit. And that's a song called Metropolis, which is on Gold Afternoon Fix, which was a bit of a hit, but very
mhm,
unsatisfying hit. It's like, yeah, it's sort of it got a little bit of airplay and was a little bit of a hit, but that's church by numbers. That's me
mm,
sitting down and the band sitting down and going, let's write a hit single.
mhm.
This is our idea of what a hit single is, and there it is. But it doesn't have the real feeling that the accidental stuff has.
Was that pretty
So
much
I
the
don't, I don't.
only time you did that with Metropolis?
Probably a few other songs on that album. We had a lot of pressure on us to sort of do something commercial, and I think it for the first and only time. Up until then, we were stumbling along, and we liked our methodology. I liked my methodology, and then when we all started writing music together, I liked that methodology. We never knew what we were going to do, and then we had the success with Starfish, and then the record company were really. I thought there would be freedom from having success, but there wasn't. There was
Hmm.
more. Oh, you've got to do this. You've got to, and so I think on that record you can hear a bunch of guys trying to write commercial music
Yeah.
to a certain extent. Um, and then after that, I never, ever, ever went along with that again. And from there on in, our records become really random and bizarre. And Pre-Sequel's Aura, a beautiful record, but did absolutely nothing. And then after that, it got even more bizarre. And it would just
Hmm.
whatever happened on the day would happen. And we made a lot of random and strange records that would never trouble the charts and would never be successful. And I didn't fucking care.
Awesome.
I've always no, I didn't. I like and I was talking to Robin Hitchcock about this once. These guys that run the record companies, they were always 3 or 4 years behind the times anyway. So when they were saying you should do something like this, the thing that they were thinking you should be like was already old fashioned. And then by the time you copied that thing and actually got it out there and all that, you'd be like 5 years away. So you'd be like, you'd be doing
Yeah.
grunge in the era of hip hop, and then hip hop in the era of Brit pop, and then Brit pop in the era of fucking Happy Mondays. You know what I mean? If you
Oh yeah.
listen to these
Yep.
guys, if you listen to them, what they thought was, and it really reached a ridiculous. I heard of bands in Sydney, and that when they were jamming, there'd be a guy from a record company standing in there going, no, no, no. don't jam on this.
Oh man.
Don't do
Jeez.
this. No, like, yeah, I know. It's like crushing it right from the beginning. So I don't, who fuck, and then much to my frustration, when I started doing a lot of interviews in America, the interviews were about record companies. Why are you with Arista? What was it like with Warner Brothers? How did you get signed up to them? Why did you leave? It's like, why are we talking
Fuck 'em.
about?
Right.
Yeah, they're like, what have they got to do with the music? It's just a label. Like, it's worth a little bit of talking about, but not, when you do an hour-long interview and all you talk about is why Warner Brothers signed you up. Like, who fucking cares? It's not about that. It's about music. So yeah, that's kind of, and now we've been with every label. We've been kicked off every label. We're not with a label at the moment. Maybe we will. Maybe we're about to sign another deal. I don't know. I don't care for labels. I don't care for all of that. People telling me what to do. I'm not really big on producers either. I don't really want anybody telling me what to do.
Right.
I don't want I really don't. Especially at this stage of the game, I don't need anybody telling me what to do. I welcome advice. I welcome consultation, but I make the fucking records I want to make, and I don't know what they are until I start making them, and then I'm obsessed with them, and then I put them out, and I forget all about them, and I move on to the next one. That's the way it works.
Yeah. That's awesome. I had this question, and it kind of tied into part of what you were talking about. I was going to ask, what do you feel like is the biggest change from the albums that the band was making in the 80s to the sound of the albums that followed? And that you might have kind of hit on that,
Oh, well, that's a good question. I think there's the church has a basic, is it tenet? Is that the word I'm looking for? It has a basic philosophy that our latest record should still be relatable to our very first record. And all the way through, when you buy a church record, I'm never going to just complete the church I'm talking about, not my own records, but the church, and never going to jump out of and make a record that isn't the church. It's always going to be, you can rely on it. It will be something like the church. It will have drums and electric guitars and thoughtful lyrics, and it won't be banal. It won't be stupid. It will always be thoughtful guitar rock, a la the Beatles, a la Dylan, a la the 60s. It will be something like that. However, within that basic format, we grow and we meander and we explore and we pause and we backtrack and but always. So, if you listen to the very first church record and you listen to the last church record, which was Eros Zeta and the Perfume Guitars, it's not inconceivable that we got from there to there. It's not like Bowie, for example, who goes, okay, now that's all done. I'm nothing like that. Now I'm going to do this. And then when he's done that, okay, now I'm going to do this. It's not like that. It's like it's like a brand that you can sort of rely on. And I would say anybody who liked any church record would like any other church record, because it's the same thing but different. And that's a paradox, to do the same thing but make it different every time. But you can rely that it will be the church. It will have electric guitars. It will be thoughtful, and it won't be rubbish.
It'll be do rubbish. Contemplative,
Contemplative,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
But it should rock a bit as well. It should have some rock. It should cut loose a bit and have some wild stuff for sure. And should have some dark stuff as well. It's not all it's not merry or jolly or happy. but it should be sort of uplifting. And
Absolutely.
you know, it's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people don't want this from their music. You know, they want I don't know, they want something banal and stupid, or they want anger, or they want politics, or they want stuff, music to get drunk to, or whatever. You know, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. I've got my own little furrow which I plow, and I plow it endlessly. And if I could live 500 years, I could go on making church records forever, within this format, because you can never. There's always another great new song to get out of this. You know, a couple of guitars and a drum kit. You can never.
It's amazing.
You can never run out. Yeah. You can never run out. You'd never run out. You could keep going forever.
Jim and I both came out of the Christian culture. You know, grew up in that.
What's that mean?
It's just kind of
grew up in church.
The church, you know, Christian church,
right.
or
Okay.
And so I can't. I'm gonna speak for Jim a little bit. I think I can, but I think that was part of the reason that we were both drawn to the music of the church, because there's a lot of religious imagery and mysticism and history, historical stuff. Were these areas that you were always drawn to when you express yourself?
Oh, yeah. We used to have a minister come to school every week, and the other kids love it. We have him for an hour a week, and it'll be him and me having a discussion, and the rest of the kids did whatever they liked. And he walked straight into the class, and I goes, "Sir, I want to talk about the Trinity." "Yeah, what do you want to know, Kilbey?" "Yeah, like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Is that a literal Trinity, or are these just three aspects?" And the other kids are great. You know, we'd have to have anything to do with this. At the same time, I was devouring religion. I also devoured mythology, and the same thing happened when Greek mythology came along in high school. Talking about Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Irish mythology. Luckily for me, when I was a kid, there was a lady, I think her name was Rosemary Sutcliffe, and she when I was 12, when I was 10 or 12, I probably couldn't have read the Iliad as it actually is. But there was this lady who would rewrite all these books for children. And so you could read the Norse myths, the Irish myths, the Greek myths for children. I read all those books. I was really big. I read Lord of the Rings before it sort of became famous, and the Chronicles of Narnia. And then later on, I got into Hinduism and Buddhism and philosophy, and of course drugs, which have been my Achilles heel. I've had a lot of trips, and a lot of sort of opium visions and ayahuasca. And so anything that's sort of not the stock market and politics and facts and figures and mathematics and science, all that stuff I'm no good at. But when it comes to Bibles and the Bhagavad Gita and the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Edda, which is the Norse version of that, all this stuff is my domain. And when I write songs, I take freely from any of those things and chuck them in songs. So yeah, I've been alluding to the Bible all along. I know that creates confusion because people go, I didn't think they were Christians, or is he a Christian or isn't he a Christian, or what's this all about? But I sort of take the things that interest me and put them in all my songs.
Well, there's so much imagery there, that you can use for, so.
There is. Look at Nick Cave. He's had a whole career railing against Jehovah of the Old Testament, and now he's embracing him. It's like a real Paul in Damascus, on the road to Damascus.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of like
Yeah.
he was fighting it all along, and then in the last few years he's accepted it, so he's still got his obsession with the Old Testament, and now he's sort of he's coming from another angle.
He's pro now.
So I mean it's rich. I mean these are like what's the word I'm looking for? They're like archetypal stories. Like I the first time you hear about King Herod, there's a prediction that the new king is going to be born, and he kills every fucking kid in the country. Yeah. Like when you hear about that when you're 7, you're like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
Like what a fucking And so, and then, one day you're sitting down and writing that song. What's the song? Kings on Pre-Sequel Zora. And you're like, wow. And it just comes up. Herod nods beneath the palms, holds poor baby in his arms. And so like, it's just, all this stuff's just floating around in my mind forever. All of these stories, these archetypal stories of the gods of God and the gods and the heroes and the villains and the devils and the angels and the avatars and all this stuff. So when I write my songs, that's sort of what I am, a melting pot of all this stuff. It all comes back out whenever it wants to.
My next question I was going to ask you was related to ambient music, and I don't know if this is true or not. This is just my own feeling. I feel like the church were kind of maybe unintentionally early pioneers of ambient music or mood in music. Can you comment on how you've incorporated the ambience into the music, especially like, I think as the albums continued to move forward, like, through time, in the 90s, I think you really started to embrace some of the ambient stuff.
Yeah. I look, I was there being very interested in Brian Eno right from the word go. And I bought all his, as they came out, I bought all those ambient, like the first one and whatever that was.
Jim might know
airports? Music
Which
for
one?
Airport? Music
No,
for
there was
airport?
it was one of the very, very first one.
Well, his first one was rocking.
First one was discrete music.
Oh, well, I'm thinking he was doing rock stuff at first.
He was doing what?
Like rock music?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he would. Yeah, but after he left Roxy, and then ambient started.
Rock albums.
He made a rock. He made Here Come the Warm Jets,
yes.
And then Taking Tiger Mountain, right. And then on Another Green World and Before and After Science, he started to develop this idea of ambient music, and then he made a purely ambient album with no vocals called Discrete Music, and then he did Music for Airports and On Land, and then I had them all, the ones with John Haskell, the ones with Bud, the ones with his brother. I had them all, and I was listening and taking it all in. And I guess when the church broke away from having any record company input or interference, we just kind of let it all hang out. And I guess everybody was in the band was kind of interested in ambience. We had very ambient sounding tracks where the guitars were there was a lot of drifty, dreamy, sort of non-pinned down stuff happened on some of our records. There was a record called Forget Yourself, and I think the last track had this like 5-minute loop of just sort of ambient guitar taking it out on a track called Summer. It was just kind of very, very ambient. And we incorporate a lot of ambient and instrumentally sort of things, like when it didn't matter anymore, when there was no pressure on us. It was hard to get away with ambient stuff when we were in the studio in LA. That was the last thing they wanted. But yeah, so I think, ambience was, Eno kind of invented this idea. There was elevator music, and but it wasn't the same as ambience. And Eno, really, you've got to give him the credit. I think he was the first guy to use the term even.
I think so.
So, as that stuff came out and I heard it and was very impressed with it, and it all got incorporated. Anything good that comes out, I will incorporate. If I hear something, an idea I like, I'm happy to steal it and recontextualize it back into the church. So I guess that's what happened with ambient music.
In 2011, you and Tim Powles collaborated on an EP for a band called Hammock. I don't know if you remember that or not.
I do.
Called Asleep in the Downlights, and I think you were on the song No Agenda, was the song that you sang on. Do you have any memories of that experience, or?
Only Tim asked me to sing on a track. I went out there, I smoked some dope, I did the track, and I went away. I didn't think much about it. And then a few months later, or when it came out, I was really surprised by it. Sometimes you do things and you don't hear them again for a long time, and then when you do hear them, you can really have a fresh pair of ears. And I remember when that track finally came back around, I heard it, I thought, wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
I almost
sounds like a church song almost.
It does.
It really does.
Yeah, it was that was a very fruitful day, but I don't remember much about it. I remember turning up and having a joint and then doing my usual thing and singing and going away, and I didn't think about it again until it came out.
I think Tim may have produced or done something on their previous album for that band. And I think what in my reading, their remembrance was that you came in, came up with the lyrics on the spot, and then did your thing, and they were like blown away. And it was the same of what you're talking about. You came in there and you came up with lyrics on the spot and just did
I always do.
So it was awesome.
You've got to come up with lyrics on some spot. You know what I mean? Like anybody who ever wrote any lyrics at some stage came up with them on the spot. It's just which spot was it?
Yeah.
My spot
Final
is
spot.
the immediate spot.
Exactly.
Other people would take them home and brood over them for like a year and then write them on that spot, or maybe a number of spots. But at some stage, that's the hard thing, I think, is to. I know so many people who can play instruments and write music, but they don't know how to write lyrics, and they don't. It's like it's a hard thing to if I've been in songwriting workshops and guys say, "Oh, I don't know what to write songs about." I go, "Write about your girlfriend." "Oh, I don't have a girlfriend." I said, "Well, make one up." "Oh, yeah, but all my friends will laugh at me because they know I don't have a girlfriend." And it's like, mate, you don't let this stuff stop you. You have a million girlfriends. You can murder people. You can take over the world. You can die. You can be whatever you like in a song.
Yeah.
And nobody can ever, it's not, you don't write songs for your friends to go, "Well, you've never done that." I mean, you can't let that stuff stop you.
You can sing from other characters' perspectives, right?
You can.
And be whoever you want, right?
With no explanation. So the verse can start off in the first person. I did this and I did that. And then by the chorus, you can be you. And then by the middle eight, it can be they. And, it's like, and then all of that could go away and you could it doesn't have to make any sense whatsoever. It can just be whatever feels right, and that's the beauty of a song. It doesn't require any confirmation, or no one's going to fact check it. You know, if you go on stage and sing, "I shot a man just to watch him die," no one in the audience can yell out, "No, you didn't," or the police. You know, the police aren't going to arrest you for saying it. You know, or so yeah, you can just more or less do whatever you like.
Awesome. Jim, you have a question about Richard Plug on Gold Afternoon Fix.
Yeah, it was a big mystery. We were talking about Gold Afternoon Fix before. Did he play any drums on that?
Yeah, he did. Okay. Unfortunately, look, I'm going to be honest here, because there was a bit of controversy over this recently on a church site. People were asking about this. Richard joined the band like a whirlwind, and he was amazing. And as the years passed, he kind of lost interest. And by Gold Afternoon Fix, he completely lost interest. And he came to America, and he'd lost interest. And the guy producing it, he was hyper focused on drums, way more than he should have been. And then Plug and I had an argument, and it behooved me to go along with the producer who wanted to kick him out. I went, all right, he's gone. And he did manage to play on a couple of tracks. It was a really big mistake that the album was put together with a drum machine. And it was based on what Plug was going to play, or what he'd played on the demos. And in actual fact, the demos of Gold Afternoon Fix do exist somewhere. You can listen to the versions with him playing live drums.
Oh, cool.
It was a real tragedy that it went down that way, but he had completely lost interest in the church and being a drummer. Unfortunately, the producer seized upon that to make the album with a drum machine. So it didn't speed up or slow down, which was what his obsession was, which was never my obsession. I don't really mind if songs speed up and slow down if that's what they want to do. But back in 1989, when we made that album, according to this guy who was producing it, the worst thing that could happen would be that the band would speed up. And so he got his wish. He kicked Plug out. Well, we both did. Him for technical reasons, me because personally I wasn't getting along well with him. And we made the album with a drum machine. So there are 3 tracks: Pharaoh, City, and then on Disappointment, the real drums come in. They are the 3 tracks that Plug plays on. Okay. And the rest of it is done with an Alesis drum machine, based on Plug's original parts. I listened to the record the other day. I thought it sounded fucking awful. And there was a bunch of guys trying to please a record company and trying to please a producer and not pleasing themselves. And the record is the worst record we've ever made. Stilted.
Wow.
What about Tantalize?
Tantalize what?
That's an awesome song. I love that song.
That's on Heyday. That's on Heyday.
You're
we're
right,
talking
you're
about
right.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just
Don't talk about Heyday, man. No, I'm just.
That's right. Yeah, I got it mixed up.
That's okay.
Yeah,
apologize. Heyday's great.
I know it's on Heyday. You just misspoke.
I just got him confused.
Yeah.
So our discussion, we talked about this on another episode we did. We talked about Golden Afternoon Fix and Heyday. And on Golden Afternoon Fix, there was a lot of, our confusion was, there was a lot of people saying that he only played on a few songs, but on other ones, they looped, like they used his drumming with the machine.
No.
Yeah, and I think that was incorrect, I guess, is what you're saying.
No. Look, they started fucking around with drums as early as Seance. So what happened with Seance is Plug played the drums then the producer, or sorry, not the producer, the mixer. The mixer came in and used Plug's drums to trigger samples. So when he hit the snare, there was an early sampling box that would play back the snare that the producer wanted. He didn't want the snare that Plug had. He wanted, that was his sound and that was his thing. And then Heyday and Starfish were completely live. And then, when we got to, however, on Under the Milky Way, the producers didn't like what Plug was doing, and they got in a guy called Russ Kunkel, who was a session drummer, to play an electro kit, like a kit that played samples. So that's Under the Milky Way, is this guy Russ Kunkel playing drums on this electro kit. And then Plug, no, there were no loops. There were no loops. Gotcha. And then it was a drum machine, and then he left, and then J.D. Doherty joined, and sometimes actually there's a track on Pre-Secret Zora which is a bit of a loop called Feel, where there's this sort of this dancey feeling which he played along to. But I like drum loops, and they're great things, but the church haven't had a real lot of looping going on. Maybe later on there were tracks with loops, but Plug's was never a loop.
Gotcha. So that album was a total affront to you, like. And then
which one's that? Gold Afternoon Fix.
Yeah, and didn't they have him on the cover too? I think they had.
That was my idea. No, my idea to have him on the cover. He got credited. He got paid. He came to LA and he had his own apartment. He had a car, and he was living life like a king. And but after about a week in. The producer was putting a lot of pressure on him and was watching him hard. And when we would go through the songs before we started, he was sitting there glaring at him, and that isn't the way to do it. And there was way too much emphasis in those days on drummers, which has since kind of gone away, I guess, because people make albums with drum machines and click tracks, so they don't need to. But this guy, Waddy Wachtel, he was really obsessed with the notion of speeding up and slowing down. He could not abide it. And Plug was like a Keith Moon type drummer. He was like, he didn't think it through. He would hear a piece of music and he'd react to it. And in the early days, that was brilliant. And by this stage, though, it was not what this guy wanted. It wasn't not what I wanted. But I don't know, I shut up and let this guy do his thing because we'd had success with Starfish, and they brought this one guy back. I thought I might as well let him do his thing. These days I would go, no, that's not happening, no.
Yeah.
You know, but in those days I just let it all go. He put a lot of pressure on Plug. Plug reacted badly. And then Plug and I had one of those arguments where that when somebody says something that you can't work with them anymore,
take it back. Yeah.
And Plug said something like, "Oh, I hate you. I've always hated you, and working with you is the worst thing in the world." And I said, "You know what? I'm sorry to hear that. That's it. Goodbye." And that was the end of him. And then we should have, at that point, got another drummer in. We should have found J.D. Doherty and brought him in to record it, but we didn't. And Waddy Wachtel had this stupid little, it was like a little Elisa's drum machine. It was about, 6 inches long. It was like a little square, and he punched it all in, and that's what you hear. And it sounds fucking awful. And then on Pre-Sequel Zora, J.D. Doherty came in, and then actually on the next album, there are a lot of drum loops, and a guy made up these drum loops independently. A guy called Boris Goodenough made all these drum loops and gave them to the church to use, and we worked with a lot of those drum loops on Sometime Anywhere. It's got a lot of drum loops. And then after that, Tim Poles appeared, and we had sort of sometimes loops, sometimes drum machines, sometimes real drumming, but it wasn't done for the same reason Waddy was doing it, to get this, because he thought a perfect record doesn't speed up and slow down. If only the me who's sitting here now could go back to 1989 and confront this very stupid idea and go, orchestras speed up and slow down, jazz bands speed up and slow down, folk musicians speed up. Why can't a rock band, as the song is getting towards the end, if everyone's excited, why can't it speed up? What's wrong with that? And he just had this cardinal rule: can't speed up, can't slow down. So that's why that all happened. I think that's, although it's not a terrible record, I think it's the worst record the Church ever made.
Gotcha. I've always enjoyed a lot of the outtakes or B-sides, you could say, from the Church albums, just as much as the album tracks a lot of times. Which is kind of surprising, but I mean, a lot of them are just, so that made me wonder, like, what's your typical process for choosing which tracks end up on, a proper studio album versus, because a lot of them seem like would, fit or switch out,
I think there was some perverse choices made where this happened. There was Beside Yourself. There was an album of B-sides called Beside Yourself. And then there was another album of outtakes and B-sides called Back with Two Beasts. And I think some of the tracks that are on those albums are better than the songs that stayed on the album. There was a lot of arguing and fighting going on in the Church. There was a lot of random and stupid decisions made to piss people off. And sometimes the wrong decision was made just to piss someone off. For example, we made this beautiful piece, 17-minute piece called So Love May Find Us, that was supposed to be on Untitled 23. And I think when the other guys knew how enamored I was with this track, they deliberately kept it off to sort of hurt my feelings or piss me off. In those days, we were indulging in more of a democracy. That would never happen these days. I now at this late stage, I started off this way, and then I experimented with democracies and oligarchies and all these other plutocracies, all these other ideas as the band went along. And in my heroin addiction days, I was not fit to be the leader, and I wasn't the leader, and all kinds of things happened, some good, some bad, because I could no longer lead. And then when I came back, it took a long time to reestablish myself as the... I mean, it would be ridiculous to think that I'm not the leader of the pack, seeing I'm the only one left, and I started this all off, and I did it all on my own so long ago. But these days, if I loved a track and I wanted it on an album, it would be on an album. But I think that Piper and Poles, knowing how much I love that track, wouldn't put it on Untitled 23, and it didn't get on Untitled 23, and it languishes on a B-side. This beautiful 17-minute, incredible song. So there was a lot of like strange and random decisions being made, not necessarily for the good of anything, but just because we're all arguing. And it's a strange thing with a band. Everybody's trying to hurt each other sometimes. Not just me either. Not just me hurting them or them hurting me. Sometimes they're hurting each other, and sometimes things get nipped in the bud because for political reasons rather than hey, let's all sit down and decide what should be the songs on this record. We've got like 50 songs, and they might go, which are the ones Kilbey really likes? Let's not put them on there because that'll really make him upset and he won't be able to do anything. And for a while, I accepted that I was in a weakened position and I wasn't running the show. But I don't know, about 5 or 6 years ago, I had to step up and go, I'm back in charge now, and these final years of the church will be it's going to be the way I'm going to say it's going to be. But for a while, there wasn't any rhyme or reason.
Gotcha.
After being like missing in action as a junkie, not always having I still went on singing and playing bass and writing songs, but I wasn't so opinionated. I was more interested in scoring the dope than I was writing songs. So I wrote and kept on going despite the heroin, and because of the way it all was, I lost my preeminence. You can understand that. The other guys had to step up and take over and make decisions that I wasn't really. I still didn't. For a while, I didn't care. I don't fucking care. Sometimes not caring is good. Sometimes it's bad. I'm just going to write this fucking lyric because I can't really be bothered trying any harder. And sometimes that was worked out, and sometimes it didn't. But and sometimes I didn't care, or I was in a weakened position, and stuff went on records. There was a whole record made. The only record I really hate that came out under the church name, which was called Parallel Universe. And it was all this. Tim Poles decided he wanted to have a remix album. And I should have nipped that one in the bud, but I was still recovering from the heroin years and I let it go. I really regret that. That should never have come out and doesn't have anything to do with the church. It was all him fiddling around with remixing. That shouldn't have come out. And it's hard to get. I doubt whether you guys even heard it. Have you?
I've heard of it, yeah. I've definitely heard of it, but I don't have it.
So it was a double album. It was an album of outtakes. The outtakes are pretty good. And then there was an album of him remixing church tracks in the latest mode, which of course now would be incredibly embarrassing and like old-fashioned sounding, which the good thing about the church is it still has this eternal vibe. Like it's not really paying allegiance to any one period. Sometimes there's a little bit of sort of stuff that's very much of its time, and I regret that. But usually it's supposed to be like it could exist in any period of rock. It's not supposed to sound like any one year, but that record really dated us as like 2003 or whatever the fuck it was. So that's why I don't like it.
Yeah, I think I've heard you say someone has to captain the ship. I think it was the phrase you used, and you have to have you have to have somebody in charge, and you were in charge. So it sounds like you spent some time, with the ship kind of being out of control to a certain extent, during those years.
Yeah, well, there's someone will step up if you if you stop doing it. Tim Poles came along on drums when I was on the gear, and the other two guys were fighting with each other, and Peter Koppes was leaving in and out. Marty was, at that stage, was the only sort of stable person. And Tim jumped in and started leading kind of by default. He was the guy, everybody started switching over to Pro Tools, and Tim understood Pro Tools. I never did, I still don't. And he was he became, because he was in charge of Pro Tools and he had the computer. And up until then, music had been a process where you'd listen. You make a record and you listen to it and go, hey, that's not right. Suddenly it became everyone was looking at these blocks and colored blocks and things moving around on a screen. And I would often go in and he'd be doing something and I would go, hey, I don't like this. And he'd go, I'm not even working on that now. And I'm like, what? And he's like, oh, I'm not, what you're hearing isn't what I'm working on. And I'm like, I sort of became disenfranchised. I became kept out of the whole thing by this new technology I didn't really understand. And by default, he took over. And some of the things he did were good and some of them were bad. But in a parallel universe where I'd never taken heroin, that never would have happened. And I would have been leading the band all along like I did in the early days and controlling our output. But yeah, I lost control. I lost control of my whole life. So no wonder I lost control within the band. And, you know, I didn't have the authority that I used to have. So it started off with me having authority and then went through different permutations and eventually has now ended up with me back in charge again, for better or for worse. But I just can't abide. It's like this is my life's work, this band. It's like I've been doing this band for 45 years and I've been thinking about it before that. And I'm the only one who really understands what it is. It's my baby, and it really is. And nobody else should ever be in fucking charge. Not a producer, not a record company, not another member of the band, not somebody's wife. You know, nobody. It's got to be me. Otherwise, it's wrong. It just is. Like, you know, no one would ever think Bob Smith would let someone else run the Cure, and no one, you know, it was wrong that anybody ever was running the church. Any of the people along the way who got into that position, none of them did the right thing. None of them really understood it. That's, you know, Waddy Wachtel, you know, doing Gold Afternoon Fix, and then when whoever it is, managers or record companies, anybody saying what the church should be, you've got a situation where things have gone wrong because has to be my baby or it won't be right. It's just the way it is. There's no room. There's room for lots of contribution, lots of room for people to come up with music and ideas. And I'm really glad that I have a bunch of players that help me do all of this. But at the end of the day, I need to have the decision on what goes and what stays. And when I didn't, all kinds of things happened and all kinds of good tracks got put on those B-side records and inferior tracks got on the real records. And I kind of regret that.
Gotcha. Jim wanted to talk about the Isadora, or is it Isadore?
Isadore. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's why I always said it, but I never know. And was that? I think that band started in the early 2000s, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and how you met Jeffrey
Kane?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Kane came to a gig and he gave me a cassette or a CD, and the message went, if you don't sing on this song, no one ever will, because I wrote this song for you to sing on. And I thought, fair enough. And then I happened to stay in a hotel that had a CD player. And I didn't have anything to play. So I went, someone gave me a CD the other day. I got the CD out and I played it and I went, wow, yeah, I can see why I've got to sing on this. And so I sang on that track, and he started sending more tracks, and eventually we made an album, and eventually we made 2 albums. Actually, one of the tracks that's on Eros Cedar was a track that was going to be an Isidore track. That when Jeffrey joined the band full time, I said, let's give this one to the church. So, yeah, he and I hit it off musically right from the word go. Incredible. He's an incredible songwriter. He's an incredible... he provides great things to sing over. He really knows what he's doing in getting a track ready that's ready to be sung over. There are people who can write instrumentals and they give them to you and you go, well, where's the singing going to go on that? Because you've like filled it all up. But Kano provides great things to sing on. So, yeah, he joined the band in 2017. Wow, he's been with us 8 years already. And he's a great asset to the band.
Go ahead, Jim.
He's from Alabama.
He is from Alabama.
Yeah,
he's from Birmingham, or even before that, Mobile.
Okay.
And he drove all the way to Atlanta with his friends to see us play in 1988, and sort of had an epiphany about, wow, this is great. So he's been into this for a long time.
Yeah.
Was he in a band before that, or?
He was in Remy Zero.
Yeah, Remy Zero.
Yeah, which was great. They were kind of short-lived, but I really liked a lot of the stuff they did.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we wanted to talk about Hypnagogue a little bit, if we can. Why don't we start with you just talking about, since you're talking about Jeffrey, maybe just the band lineup right now, as far as who played on it, if you could share that.
Well, yeah, Jeffrey on guitar and keyboards. Ian Hogue, who's been with us from 2013. He was in the biggest Australian band ever called Powderfinger, and they broke up. And when Marty left the band in 2013, someone said to me, you should bring Ian Hogue. And so I rang Ian, and Ian wanted to join. I knew he was a fan, but I didn't know if he'd want to play, but he joined. And then when Peter Koppes left in 2019, Ian had said to me, but I already had my eye on him, Ian said, this is the guy we should get. And it was Ashley Naylor, an Melbourneian guitarist who's like one of those guys, if you put a band together in Australia, there's 2 or 3 guitarists you might get. He's one of them. Mm-hmm. He's understands, he's professional, he looks good, he plays really great guitar. So we asked him to join, and he joined. And we went in the studio just before COVID and the bushfires in Australia, and we wrote all this music. And then later on I went back in and did the lyrics and put the singing and stuff on. So that's how that all happened.
So Hypnagogue is a concept album, right?
It wasn't to start with, and as it went on, and as I began working on it on my own, I could see that it could be, and I made it become that, but it wasn't preconceived that way.
Can you talk a little bit about it? I know you've talked about this a lot, I'm sure, to people, but if you could...
The concept is, in the future, there's a guy, he's basically me, but he's a futuristic version of me, and he's young again. And he can't write songs anymore. And I wrote a book about this, by the way. It's called Eros Cedar and the Hypnagogue. It's like a sci-fi novella and everybody's putting pressure on him. Why don't you write some songs or ban the Eros Zeta and the Perfume Guitars, his band? We need some songs. And he hears about this thing called the hypnagogue that a scientist has invented in Korea. And it runs on magic and drugs and spare parts. And it's a dangerous and immoral kind of thing. And it's sort of it's fucking with things it shouldn't be fucking with. And everyone says, no, don't use it, Eros, don't use it. But he goes over there and he uses it. And this machine that drags music out of your head, out of your dreams, out of your past lives, out of the very fiber of your being, it sort of dredges everything out. That's really the story. It's a sort of, I guess since that happened, people have tried to draw comparisons between that and AI. And it's like the consequences of using a dangerous thing just to get a song out of it. And that's all what it is. But it's not really a moral tale. It's tempting to go, oh yeah, there's a moral to this story, but there isn't really. It's just a story for the fun of having a story. And then we made the album Eros Zeta and the Perfume Guitars, which was like, this is what Eros Zeta sort of sounded like. And then I wrote the novella, and I've even made a little solo album called Pandora Mod Z Art, and that's in the novella. Eros Zeta has this hero, this guy that's in a band called Pandora Mod Z Art. So I've even fleshed out that world. I got really into it for a while, this little world of Eros Zeta, and fleshed it all out with these different things. But then last year in May, the church made an album in Austin, and it's nothing to do with any of this. It's a brand new thing.
Oh, cool.
And the album's called Lacuna, which is like a gap or a space. And that's the sort of the end of Eros Zeta now. So no more about him. It's all there if you want to go back and look at it. But our new album is just a collection of songs that don't have any real connection between themselves.
That's awesome.
When's
something
that
to look forward to? Yeah. When are we gonna?
Yeah, when are we going to hear that? Nobody seems to really know. It's being mixed right now.
Cool.
In fact, when I stop doing this interview, there's a brand new mix for me to listen to. So I don't know. I guess it'll be out towards the end of the year.
Awesome. Sweet. You talked about there's really no moral to the story, and of the hypnagogue. But I do feel like there's these little, pieces here and there that kind of make people reflect. There's the part in the hypnagogue about pulling the music. Remember the music pulled out of your head.
Yeah.
And it's kind of got that, like you were talking about, that AI type thing. Like it's sort of getting something that comes easily, right? It just, it's not genuine. It's just pulled out of you.
Yeah.
There's some other phrases and stuff. I don't have them all written down, but there's in Amanita, there's a phrase about it's getting to the stage where everyone thinks they're going to be someone in this big world, and that makes me laugh. You remember that line? I love that line, and it makes me think of the technology and the social media and YouTube and stuff like that. But just you didn't necessarily mean that, but there's little things like that just, I think, are just causing me to be very reflective, and they're kind of poignant,
I think every word and phrase I use, I try and get as much mileage out of it as I can. I'll try and let everything be as ambiguous and have as many possible meanings as it can have. And there's some good examples of that. Certainly. Yeah, all of that. Everything you said, I agree with. And it's hard to elaborate on this stuff too much because it's all there. There it is in the lyrics, and to elaborate on it anymore would take away the power of the song. So if somebody comes up to me and says, what is a song about? I go, whatever you think it's about, that is what it's about.
It is.
And
Exactly.
and don't listen to what I think it is, because that will only, it's like a magician does a trick and people go, where did the rabbit come from? And if you explain that the rabbit was up my sleeve or in the box already or under the table, they're not going to enjoy that. So
Yeah.
there's a certain point where you can't explain anymore. And the things you just said about the Amanita song and all of that is exactly right. And I agree with you. But it's hard to elaborate beyond that, other than everything I write, I try and get a lot of bang for my buck out of each line. So it could mean this, it could mean this. Now, people said, what does that mean, lower the curtain down in Memphis? And it's about Elvis Presley. Yes, it is. But it's also about a million curtains coming down in a million Memphises, all the way back to Memphis in Egypt. Yeah. It's whatever it means to you. These songs are written to be evocative and have many meanings. And I try and write so everybody who hears them can take it on in their own way. And I would never say to somebody, that isn't right, what you think it is. It's whatever you think it is, that is exactly what it is.
Nice. I have a couple one question, one comment. Albert Ross, is that like a play on words?
Yes.
Okay.
That wasn't my play on words either. That was Ian. When we wrote that song, Ian said, why don't we call it Albert Ross? And I was like, oh. And then strangely enough, Albert Ross is a roadie. Strangely enough, we have a roadie called Ross. And Ross has since been saying to people, that song is about me. And when we would play it, he'd be standing on the side of the stage, beaming and really happy. And then it is. You know,
then it is about him.
Then it is about you. If you think it's about you, then it is about you. And in the novel, Albert Ross has a lot more. Albert Ross accompanies Eros into the hypnagogue, and he goes missing and he never comes back out. And a lot of people were sad about that when they read the novel. What happened to Albert? What happened? Tell me he's all right. And I'm like, I can't tell you that. It's like he's in the hypnagogue forever now, wandering around. He'll never find his way out.
Awesome.
Listen, guys. Okay, we're coming to a point now. My phone battery has run out, even though I charged it. I can keep talking on headphones until I run out, which I'd say would be about 5 minutes. But this has happened before. When I unplug the headphones after a long Zoom to plug in the power, because you can't have both. Mm-hmm. If I unplug them, sometimes I can't, you won't hear me and I won't hear you. I don't know why, it's a quirk. So we can agree that the interview is probably going to run out, and it'll just happen. I won't have any warning because I've already had you've got 10 minutes left, 10 percentage left. Yeah, so I think probably best thing is we just keep going, and then I'm going to be gone, and that'll be the end of it. And if you really want if you feel like there's a lot more to talk about and you want me back on, we can, you feel there's a lot you never got around to talking about, I'd be happy to schedule another one with you.
Sweet. Yeah, we'll just do it that way. We'll just keep it going and see
we'll keep
where
it going.
Run out. And,
it could be 3 or 4 minutes. It's just in the middle, it's going to just go. with no warning. All right?
Yep. Yep.
That's good. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's good. Let's talk a little bit with the few minutes we have. Let's talk about the road to Tibooburra. I'm trying to say that
Tibooburra,
right.
yeah.
That just came out, right?
Just came out.
Like a few, maybe in the last week. Yeah.
In the last week, a ridiculous thing.
So interesting. So
I met
interesting,
a guy,
though.
yeah, I know. So I met a guy. He had a lot of ideas. I admire guys who have lots of ideas. Obviously, he was like a fountain of ideas. He wanted me to be in a movie. Went and made the movie with him. As we're making the movie, he's already losing interest in that movie and going, "I'm going to make another 2 movies at the same time." And then the movie never really got finished. It's kind of finished, but it's not finished, and probably never will be finished, which is a shame. And then he said, "I've got a new idea. You get on a bus. I'm going to fill this bus up with arty types, and we're going to go in the furthest outback of Australia, into the very outback, the fringes of civilization, and it's going to." And he had all these different ideas he was trying to incorporate. The early explorers thought Australia must contain an inland sea, and they went looking for it. Mm-hmm. It was also about this painter called Ian Fairweather, who painted all these pictures. He built a raft and used to drift around intercontinentally on this raft. He was this crazy painter. And it was about all this stuff. And we're all going to get on this bus, and you're going to be Ian Fairweather in this movie. And then nothing ever happened. All these people, all these crazy yardy types. We got out to Tibooburra, which is verily on the edge of nothingness in the middle of Australia. We got out there, nothing happened. And then we came back, and there was no movie made from that either, nothing at all. And then he said, "I've got a new idea. There's going to be a musical. It's going to be about a guy like you who gets on a bus to go to the middle of Australia." So it's sort of like an image, a mirror reflecting. So what you just experienced, I'm now going to write a musical about. Can you write the songs for this musical? And I said, yes, I can. So each day he would ring me up and go, "Okay, I want a song called Desert Ship." I go, "All right." I wrote a song called Desert Ship about wandering around in the desert. And then he'd write me up and ring me up. And okay, I want another song now called The Morning After. All right. So I wrote all the songs. The musical was performed twice. It was ridiculously ambitious, and it ended without a trace. And it was ridiculously ambitious twice. It got performed. The audience were mainly the senior citizens that had been roped in from a nearby facility, who had no chance of understanding any of this shit. And but I went in with this band I had called the Winged Heels and recorded it like 4 or 5 years ago. And just recently I thought, fuck this, it's really good. Every now and then I'd play it, this music. And so I got it finished, I got it mixed, and I released it. It's sort of like 4 years out of date, but I just thought, what a shame. I wrote all these songs, and
absolutely.
each one took me 5 minutes to write. I'd write them in 5 minutes and on acoustic guitar, like proper honest songwriting songs, not constructed in a studio. And took my band in, very much live. There's no click tracks.
Yeah.
Very much live, with great players. Gareth Koch, the guy I was talking about before, the classical guitarist, a multi-instrumentalist called Roger Mason, and my mate Barton Price on drums. And we just recorded it really quickly, and I sang it really quickly, and it was all done quickly. And last week I put it out, and people like it. I thought they would.
It's cool.
It's it's the most country out. It's like if someone said,
"Oh shit, here he goes." Oh.